Coming to you from the home of Franklin's finest, this is the APB Podcast. Here now is Franklin Police Public Information Manager, Max Winitz.
Welcome in, everybody, to episode 9 of the APB Podcast. Thanks, as always, for making us a part of your week. Today's episode titled The Crime Scene Tech. And this episode is really geared toward all of you, and we certainly know there are plenty of you who are fans of TV shows like CSI. Today we're sitting down with MPO David Heyer. He is one of the crime scene techs here at the Franklin Police Department. Extremely passionate about what he does, and he's going to take us through what happens out at a crime scene, followed by what takes place back here at the Franklin Police Department in the hours and days after that incident takes place. He's also going to explain what are the differences between what you see on TV and what you see in real life, and there are plenty of them. So it's a fascinating conversation, a conversation that all of you forensic nuts, fans of science, are really going to embrace. So stick around for that. But for right now, let's get to the news. We are publishing this podcast on July 3rd, one day prior to Independence Day, and it is important for us to remind you that consumer fireworks are illegal within the city limits of Franklin. Since 1999, the use and sale of consumer fireworks have been prohibited in Franklin due to public safety concerns and fire hazards. Violators may face fines and may be held liable for damages. The safest way to enjoy fireworks is by attending a public display conducted by trained professionals, such as the July 4th fireworks show at the park at Harlansdale Farm. And the Franklin Police Department is gearing up for the upcoming school year by hiring a part-time school crossing guard to help keep our kids safe on their way to class. You will provide pedestrian safety and manage traffic flow in school zones. You also work part-time hours during school days. We're looking for somebody who is kind, yet assertive, and somebody who is adaptable to varying weather conditions. The salary, $23.45 to $25.52 an hour. If you are interested in this position, just head on over to the City of Franklin's hiring website. When we come back, our conversation with MPO David Heyer, one of the crime scene techs here at the Franklin Police Department. A very interesting conversation about CSI. Stay with us.
Are you ready to make a difference in your community? The Franklin Police Department is seeking dedicated, passionate individuals who want to protect and serve in the South's most charming town. As a member of our internationally accredited team, you'll be part of a dynamic, supportive department that values integrity, professionalism, and community engagement. Enjoy competitive benefits, career advancement opportunities, and the chance to truly impact the safety and well-being of our neighbors. For more information, visit franklintn.gov/joinfpd. That's franklintn.gov/joinfpd.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Max Winitz coming to you today from the crime lab here in the basement of the Franklin Police Department. We are being joined by MPO David Heyer. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So today we are discussing CSI, crime scene techs like yourself. I know you are very passionate about forensics and science, and we're going to talk all about that in just a little bit. But as I always do on every podcast, start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your law enforcement journey, how long you've been with the Franklin Police Department.
So, I've been in law enforcement close to 11 years now, about a little over 4 here at Franklin. I came from East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office down in Louisiana. I started out actually as a dispatcher there, and it's kind of odd. People, way the sheriff's office is run down there, even the dispatchers are commissioned. So as a dispatcher, I went through an academy and carried a gun in dispatch and worked in a big, dark emergency operations center. After about a year of that, I got transferred to Uniform Patrol. Did that close to 3 years. And then transferred up into detectives as a crime scene detective full-time. That's all I did was crime scene. did that for a few years, and then ended up landing here.
How did you hear about Franklin being in Louisiana?
Yeah, no. So my little brother went to Belmont up here. He and his family live in Spring Hill, so we came up and visited a couple times. Loved the area, beautiful area. Would come up here for fishing trips and the like. So just really liked the area, the people that we met, and read about the school districts, and it was just time to move.
And what was it about this police department specifically that sold you?
Ironically, it was one of the first police departments that I actually encountered while I was here. My older brother and I were going to fish the Harpeth right by Bicentennial Park, and we were doing some fly fishing that day. And as we pulled up to park right there, which is now I think Martin Luther King Boulevard, we saw a bunch of officers crowded around the river. I didn't know what was going on or anything, but it was just seemed like the logical choice.
So when you were doing dispatch, did you know that you were going to segue into a patrol officer?
I wanted to, because when I originally applied to law enforcement, I applied to the New Orleans Police Department. I was a fair amount heavier then.
Sure.
I weighed about 275 pounds, and on my 5'6" on a good day frame, that looked like the Mr. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So I did not. I actually failed my very first PT test for the New Orleans Police Department. It was humiliating. I had practiced it beforehand, got my 1.5-mile run down. It was actually one of those things, they say, I know the chief echoes this, when she's swearing in new people, that the wives are the real heroes, and they've been sworn in too. And it was that, because after I failed that PT test, which had to go home in front of 50 people, and it just feels terrible. Even before that happened, I was just working an IT job. That's what my degree was in. I was working for Apple and doing a couple other odd-end jobs around. And I just really wasn't happy with my circumstances. My wife, Katie, she basically said, she's like, am I going to have to listen to you complain for the rest of your life, or you're going to get off your butt and do something? So I was like, well, I'm going to need a gym membership. And so I started down that journey of physical fitness and trying to get in shape. Failed my first PT test, applied to the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, which actually had a harder PT test. And about a month after failing that PT test, I ended up passing the East Baton Rouge one, because the dispatcher qualifications were a little bit less than patrol. And all the while when I was in dispatch, I would use my little pedal bike underneath my dispatching desk and just kept working on that, losing weight and all that. Went to the academy, continued on that fitness journey, and after about a year of doing the dispatch thing, I was down to right around, from 275 right around 200 mark. Ended up getting down to about 180 at that into patrol there.
Good for you.
So, yeah, it was quite the journey. But that's why I started in dispatch. But I kind of knew from a young age that I wanted to be a cop, but it was that one career that my parents didn't want me to do.
Well, in middle school, high school, did you always have an interest in science and forensics?
No, and that's part of the part that a little part of myself dies inside when thinking about science class, because when I did pick up the CSI bit, especially in Baton Rouge, I was able to go to schools and talk to kids about forensics, and go to Boy Scouts and do their fingerprint badges. I've done a couple of those, and do some presentations for Girl Scouts as well. And I feel like if I had known then just how it would be applicable to my later life, I would have had a lot more interest in it. Like, if you could tell me that a wavelength of light could excite electrons and cause them to break orbit and crash into each other, causing a luminescence, then I could then wear a special kind of glasses to nullify the blue light and pick up on the reaction. And then if I had the photography skills, that I could actually capture that on camera to prove that something was luminescing there, to then isolate that stain for further analysis. Man, I would have been all about it, all about science class, and you could have told me all the colors of the rainbow, and I'd be very interested in it.
Sure. So you've been here 4 years now.
Yeah.
What has kept you at this department?
So, I'm, I don't want to be cliche and mention this, but the compensation is nice. I mean, certainly better compensated than I was at my last department. It's just the area. We're rooted here in Tennessee. We consider Tennessee our home now. I like the size of Franklin Police Department, being at the 130-ish officer mark, somewhere in there. You know, it's considered, in terms of the state of Tennessee, a fairly large agency. I think last I checked, it was the ninth largest.
Yeah.
But it's small enough to stand out if you're good at something, but big enough to have opportunity. So I think that is what keeps
And you have taken advantage on opportunities. You're a member of the crisis negotiation team.
Mm-hmm.
You're a crime scene tech. At one time, you were part of the dive Swiftwater unit. So
Yeah.
there have been those opportunities for you
Yeah.
to, get outside of doing just patrol.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think when you do this job long enough, you get to that 3-4 year mark, it helps to do something other than just basic patrol. And I don't mean move to another division, but just add a little extra curricular to it, whether that be a dive, Swiftwater, hostage negotiation, peer support, honor guard, SWAT, whatever, because it helps break up the monotony. This is a marathon race, not a sprint. And so I think adding some of those things helps invigorate that spirit that got you into it in the first place.
So let's focus on you being a crime scene tech. What would you say really inspired you to get involved with this?
So I like to say that crime scene is the kind of the career path that chose me, not the career path that I chose. At my last agency, I was perfectly happy in patrol. I wanted to get to the sergeant role at my last agency, which was kind of the sweet spot, or in my eyes it was. And I didn't know that I wanted to get into crime scene at all. It wasn't planned for me. One morning, I remember being in briefing, and we worked 12s back then, and it was a little unpleasant because we swapped nights to days every 2 weeks, so that was a little hard on the circadian rhythm. So I remember being in briefing one morning. We had a call of a shooting, and come to find out, the previous patrol shift got there, and we joined. What happened was the homeowner had come out of his house to find his vehicle being burglarized by two individuals. But he didn't see two. He only saw one. So he took his handgun and pointed it at one and was giving him orders, while the other individual ended up shooting him 3 times. He was just shot in both arms, and that was tourniqueted by patrol, and so he survived. Come to find out that these burglars, I think there was 13 affected vehicles in the area. And because of the nature of the crime scene was called out. At that agency, a normal theft from vehicle burglary thing that we'd classify like that, crime scene did not respond to just a one-off vehicle burglary. But because of the attempted homicide aspect of it, crime scene came out. So all the vehicles that were affected in the area, every time we got a call that an owner had noticed that their vehicle had been burglarized, they were prioritized in the queue, and the one crime scene investigator on duty, because it was one per shift, 4 shifts, came out to process all the vehicles, because they had to be done meticulously. And if you've ever been to Louisiana, the humidity is horrible.
Sure.
Yeah. And the heat will just get to you. And so after about 12 vehicles, this guy named Jason Fitzpatrick, who ended up being a colleague and dear friend of mine down there, just looked like he was worn out. After detailed processing on 12 vehicles, he just looked horrible. And it looked like he was suffering from some sort of heat-related illness. Mm-hmm. So I had, at that point in patrol, solved a number of cases by fingerprint hits, because basic patrol was required to do fingerprints and DNA for vehicle burglaries. So they elected me to process the 13th vehicle. Well, I did that, and that owner did what all normal owners that notice their vehicle being burglarized should do, which is basically take it to the gas station to get it vacuumed out. No, I'm kidding. Do not touch your vehicle if it's been burglarized. Don't even go in it to see what's missing. Let us come and process it. But he was hosing off his grill, which was right in front of the vehicle, getting the vehicle wet. It stuck out to me. Well, I processed it for prints, and I ruined a couple fingerprint brushes because they got wet, and a fiber filament brush is not good for moisture. So I submitted my prints to the latent lift examiners. We had 2 that worked for the sheriff's office that could analyze the prints. The homicide division was actively involved in that particular crime, and they were running all the DNA swabs at Louisiana State Police Crime Lab at rush speed, which is a very, very expensive process. Well, after a couple of days, they hadn't received any DNA hits. Come to find out, I get a call on Friday afternoon that from Jason Fitzpatrick that we did it. And I was like, what do you mean we did it? He goes, I got a fingerprint hit on the vehicle where the homeowner was shot, and you got a same fingerprint hit on the very first vehicle that was actually burglarized, which is where the firearm that shot the guy was taken from. So, and it's a match, and he rolled on the other person in interrogation, and so they got both in custody. So helping to solve that attempted homicide from a patrol, it just brought a feeling
Incredible
that,
rewarding.
Oh my gosh, it was just like...
So since that incident in Louisiana and here in Franklin, what sort of education, training have you had to go through to, perfect your skills?
I don't think perfect is the word. Forensics is probably the most nimble discipline within law enforcement. It is inventing ways to solve crimes almost as fast as criminals can find ways to commit them. So I don't know about perfect, but I was heavily recruited to apply for the crime scene position that was open at that time, and so I did. And I had been told by many people that I was not going to get it, but I ended up getting it, which was nice. I came in to work that first morning, and I was paired up with the lieutenant over crime scene at that time. His name was Alan Boudier, a dear mentor of mine who's since passed. And I spent the first 6 months in the crime scene division responding to crime scenes with him every single day. And he was one of the founding members of their crime scene division down there and had been in the division at that point over 20 years. And I, of course, went to a basic crime scene class through IPTM. I went through a digital photography class through Ron Smith and Associates. And then I went through a videography class with the Midwestern Drug Counterterrorism unit, learning how to video.
But the experience you got, though, shadowing this mentor of yours was by far the best experience.
He was such an incredible individual. He had a way of being able to just look at evidence on, and one of the things that's kind of a misnomer about crime scene investigation is unique. It's very different from patrol work because I don't care who did what as a crime scene investigator, and I know that I am an unbiased party. Like, my work as a crime scene investigator is just as likely to prove someone is innocent as it is guilty. I don't have a dog in the fight. So, and when I teach crime scene investigators and crime scene technicians, I want to know a basic synopsis of what happened, but I don't need to know who the players are. I want to just see what the evidence says. And this individual, Alan, he just had this knack where he looked at the evidence, he'd spend a few minutes walking around, and it was like he could see it on film, playing out. And on more than one occasion, he would just say, I'm like, yeah, I see the casings on the ground. I don't know where the other casing is. He goes, well, I think it bounced off the blinds, trickled down, and it's probably in one of those shoes there.
And he's right.
Lo and behold, it would be there. It was just he had a vision for it from years and years of doing it. So yeah, my experience in that mentorship and going through the FTO, as it would, for a crime scene was about a 6-month process. Very intensive.
So take me out to a crime scene. It varies, obviously, crime by crime, but let's say it's a homicide.
Sure.
Take me through the first steps, right when you get to the scene. What exactly are you doing along with the other techs here at the department?
Well, I tell this, and it sounds cliche, but I tell investigators when they're coming to scenes to investigate, the first step to response to a crime scene is plan and proper attitude. You actually have to, all the personal stuff needs to go out of your mind. Any assumptions that you think you have, you can make theories about what you think happened, what are in the call notes and things like that, but you need to be prepared to abandon any theory if you have evidence that contradicts it, okay? People lie, evidence doesn't. Evidence can be construed, it can kind of lead to weird things that you can't explain, and you can develop theories on that, but if you get evidence that clearly just makes it your theory completely wrong, you need to be prepared to abandon it. So I think I was training an investigator down in Baton Rouge, and when I was training him, he had just gotten yelled at by a supervisor, and he was so fixated. He talked about it on the entire way to the scene, and it happened to be a hanging on that particular one, and it ended up being ruled a suicide. And a quick, fast rule, by the way, is everything's a homicide until it's not. So we treat scenes the same. We're trying not to make assumptions. So he gets there, and we're walking around taking photos of the scene, and at some point, I'm just kind of like evaluating him and how he's processing the scene. He says to me, he's like, "Oh man, it's really hot in here." And I was like, "Have you taken a picture of the thermostat?" And he's like, "No, I haven't." And I was like, "Well, a lot of people will either make it hotter or colder in an apartment to basically, it's not like CSI the movie where the death investigator comes in or the coroner comes in or medical examiner and says, this person died 45 minutes ago. No, that's not the case. It's a pretty broad window. But people can delay or encourage rigor mortis to have an early onset based on the temperature in the room. So, and he was just so in his head still about that, yelling that he had from the supervisor that he couldn't concentrate on the scene. So the first step to any scene is a proper plan and attitude. So from there, it does vary a little bit agency to agency, depending on their capabilities, because agencies are different sizes. You might have something like New Roads Police Department in Louisiana, which at my time when I was down there was like 12 officers. Your one detective is your crime scene processor, and they might only have a camera, maybe a fingerprint brush. And then you have like the big agency that I came from, where you have a dedicated division. We're a division in every sense of the word, specially marked vehicles, specialized training, and all the like. So typically the next thing is to photograph the scene as you find it. But even before that, as you arrive, I'm really checking the perimeter. It's a full step, but I kind of consider it a half step. When I get out of the unit, I want to make sure that the crime scene is adequately protected, that the barrier is big enough, that I have enough room to work. I think crime scene security is a huge part, and it's easier to condense a crime scene down if it's too big than to make it bigger. I often tell the story of one night I was working a drive-by. And it was a drive-by down a dead-end street, not the area you want to do a drive-by in, because the homeowner was armed and shot back. And now you're in a dead end and have to come all the way back. Well, there were about 4 houses that were struck by gunfire in that particular case. And we marked off the scene to include the 4 houses and all that. Well, lo and behold, we start getting phone calls from residents down at the dead end of the street, a quarter mile away, that are finding shell casings down there. Very hard to expand that extra quarter mile. So next thing I really want to work at is make sure the crime scene is adequately protected, make sure there's a crime scene log going, and just make sure everything's secure for me to operate. Then I begin by photographing the scene as I find it. And I like to say as I find it is an important modifier, because the scene might be different when I get there than when patrol showed up. And maybe they find some casings on the ground and they put those pesky little business cards to show where they found cases. Well, I'm not going to go around and pick all those up. And I'm not going to exchange them for markers yet, but I want to photograph the scene as it is when I get there. Okay, so I take my photographs, and those typically, I'm just doing overalls at this point. Overall photographs are basically documenting all affected areas. I'm not zooming in on any casings yet. I'm just taking broad photographs of all affected areas. After that, I'm going to usually put down my markers if it's applicable. On homicide, almost always going to be applicable. check fraud at a bank where I'm going there and just collecting a check. Probably not going to take the teller's desk and put a number 1 crime scene marker on it. But on a homicide, we'd exchange with markers, and then it's going to be overall photos again. After I do the overall photos, I'm going to be doing mid-range photos. The thing that distinguishes a mid-range photo is that I'm photographing a specific piece of evidence with its relationship to the scene. So I'm anchoring it into the scene, so to speak. Like if there's a house number that's right next to a bullet hole, might want both the bullet hole and the house number, because then I'm going to go in on a close range photo. And the close range photo, I like to take 2. The first one is a different angle than the mid-range, close as I can get, eliminating, it's called maximizing or filling the frame, sorry. We're basically excluding any extraneous details and filling the frame with that item of evidence or marking or whatever we're photographing. And then I typically do a second close range photo that involves a scale. Like I said, things are different capability-wise. So at my last agency, we didn't have a Faro device. We were working on getting one. They use one now. So we didn't have a Faro scanner. But before evidence collection, before processing or anything like that, I would want to document measurements for a sketch of some sort.
And for those who don't know, explain what a Faro scanner is.
So a Faro scanner is basically a laser measuring device, and it's more accurate than anything. And it takes photos too. It stands on a tripod, and it shoots lasers rotating. The head rotates one way, the laser rotates another, and it's taking constant measurements and points, as they call it, to map the scene. It allows us to create 2D and 3D renderings. It allows us to create fly-throughs. It allows us to create almost a video where a jury can walk in and fly through the scene and see it more accurately than I can measure it with a hand measuring device or sketch it. So after I've got measurements, whether that be manual or Faro, I would typically take a crime scene video in there. Once I've got my video of the items of evidence, then I'm going to collect the items of evidence that I've marked and can see. That's not going to be all the items necessarily, because we're not upturning mattresses or digging into walls for bullets yet. So after I've collected my evidence, now I'm going to look at my processing needs. Do I have blood evidence that needs to be tested with phenolphthalein, which is a presumptive blood test? Do I have fluids, fibers, bullets, casings, whatever that need to be processed on scene? Do I have fingerprints? Fingerprints is the last thing you do on a scene. We're not doing fingerprints first. A lot of people think like, oh, I need fingerprints first because if I swab for DNA, well, part of what I teach in my class, the standard technique is oblique lighting. Like, fingerprint leaves oils and stuff. I could see my fingerprint just by looking at the right ambient light at an angle to that particular print. I can see the ridge detail there. So if I know there's a fingerprint there and I can find it, I can do my DNA swaps first. The reason fingerprints are last or Locard's rule. Are you familiar with Locard's rule?
No.
That's the exchange principle. Basically, Locard lived a long time ago, 1800s, I believe, stated that when two objects interact, there's an exchange of microscopic material. What that means for me as an investigator is 2 things. Well, 3, really. The definition of that states that I can't enter a crime scene without leaving a piece of myself there, or without taking a piece of the scene with me, if that exchange principle is true. So the goal of the crime scene investigator is twofold. You're trying to minimize your own exchange, because you can't eliminate it, but we might do that through wearing a Tyvek suit or booties or gloves or any of the other PPE that we wear, and to find where the exchange was from the person that committed said offense and document that. And there's a good chance that if you find it and document it well enough, that will help solve the case.
So other than the Faro scanner and just your standard, camera,
Yeah.
any other tools or technology you utilize at a crime scene regardless of the offense?
Regardless of the offense.
Yeah.
Well, Faro is really going to be brought out for the bigger events like homicides and stuff. We carry trajectory rods. I might use trajectory rods that are different colored fiberglass rods to show how bullets are going into a structure. So It just depends on the scene. And what do you consider technology?
What do I consider technology?
Yeah. Are we talking about an electronic?
Anything that helps you out at the scene that is, an electronic
yeah, electronic. So, I would definitely say lighting is a big one.
Yeah, you can't see it on camera, but if you go back into this room, you got a bunch of lamps in there.
Lighting's a big one. Metal detectors I've used on a homicide scene here in Franklin. So it just depends on what the scene calls for. And a lot of those things are either here at the lab or they're in the crime scene van, and we'll have them, when the investigators do their initial walkthrough with the detective, we'll have those things brought to the scene. So it just depends. Yeah, we have a variety of pieces of technology. You might, we have right behind, I don't know if you can't see it on the screen here, but we have tools like drills and saws and things like that. We've had it where on certain scenes we've had to collect entire doors. Even on one in Louisiana, we had to collect an entire deer stand, which was pretty big. So it just kind of depends. But yeah, we have a variety of tools.
So once you're done out at the crime scene, you come back here to the lab, and just tell me a little bit about, in a nutshell, what goes on where we are right now.
So where we are is, first and foremost, is storage for a lot of our chemicals and things that we use for processing. The main thing is there's 3 C's in crime scene investigation. It's the care, custody, and control. And so we're talking about the care of evidence when we get back. When we get back, we're trying to maintain the integrity of the evidence. So what does that item of evidence need? Well, it's different for every scene. The last homicide that I worked here, a lot of the items were wet. So before I can do anything with them, they need to dry. And I need a sterile environment that's not going to transmit any new DNA to those items, where those items can effectively dry. So I, for that particular case, had to check out a drying room, have to get those items in there, submit them to the drying room with their packaging. And some things I can analyze and process here, and other things are above our capabilities at this time. So I can't examine a bullet slug with NIBIN, which would basically be ballistic analysis. But I can submit that immediately and mark it for NIBIN or a shell casing. So it just depends on the item of evidence. There's a lot to happen. But basically what I want to do is get the items safely back from their packaging on scene here, take care of them in the way that they need to be. If they're wet, I need to dry them. If they require specific packaging, I need to obtain that and submit them all into evidence. Then I will be earmarking on my checklist certain items that might need further processing. So if there's some sort of exchange of violence between a couple of individuals, it's likely that either blood is exchanged or human fibers, whether from hair or otherwise, were exchanged. And I might want to get those off that particular item. So once I've dried that item, if it's wet, or I've packaged it and put it in as evidence, I might check it back out of evidence when I have time, take it to a processing table much like this, and start by photographing it again in a laboratory environment and walking people through. I think that's the main thing, is that we're walking the people, the jury, the court, through the investigation through our photographs. So I start by photographing it. If it's blood stains or other human fluids, might be marking those stains on the individual item for future analysis. I might be doing presumptive blood tests or specialized photography with Blue Star, which causes blood to luminesce.
So how much do you enjoy doing the stuff in here versus, out in the field? And here you got the white lab coats out in front of the door here. You turn into a scientist.
Yeah, kind of. I like to think of it as we're the paramedics of the forensic world. In that sense, is like the paramedics, they know a fair amount about medicine. They do some schooling and stuff like that, but they're not a doctor, right? In the same way, I'm not a lab analyst. I'm not analyzing DNA in here. I'm not even analyzing the specific fingerprints on the latent lifts that I obtained from the scene. But I am kind of triaging everything so that it can get to that person, if that makes sense. That more qualified or more scientific person.
In all your years in law enforcement, it goes without saying you've responded to some horrific, tragic scenes. I'm just curious how you sort of manage that emotional toll that it takes on you.
Well, I would encourage anyone that I mean, what's the estimate of traumatic events that a normal person experiences in their life? I'm sure it varies research to research, but the consensus from the research I've seen is less than 10. Like truly traumatic. In law enforcement, you're multiplying that by 100 over the course of your career. I think mental health is one of the most overlooked things. It's a crisis that spans not just law enforcement officers, but the general public as well. We see this every day on patrol, dealing with more and more people that are going through mental crisis. And so I think we have to come to an acknowledgement. I am trying to stuff 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack. I need some sort of relief valve for that. And I'm not saying that I need a Sally sob session where I'm just getting out all and boo-hooing everywhere with a box of tissues. It looks different for everyone. But I think one of the things that I've learned from being a peer supporter, and one of the reasons I am a peer supporter, is that this is so vital that you at least talk to someone. One of the things that I think affected me originally in crime scene, and it did affect me towards the end of my career at the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, is terminal uniqueness. And terminal uniqueness is simply like you go through a tragedy and you believe that you are the only person that feels like this. No one understands how I feel. No one understands what I've been through. When I went to my first critical incident debriefing, which was a bunch of cops sitting around in a circle, and all we're doing in a critical incident debriefing is that we have a facilitator and a bunch of cops sitting around that say, all right, who was on scene first? All right, that person raised their hand and they say, all right, what did you see? What happened? And after we were done, I was like, there are 10 other people in this room that think like I do, that act like I do. They might have had slightly different perspective. They might have slightly different situation they were in or slightly different experience from what they dealt with. But I'm not alone in this. And so I think that's a big realization. That environment of where you are talking, whether it be a peer supporter one-on-one or you're doing a critical incident debriefing with everyone that was on that particular traumatic scene, it brings a lot of peace. And the other thing I think is important is something that June McHenry says, is to take off the uniform. Like, go out and do something not law enforcement related. I think one of the mistakes that new law enforcement officers make all the time is their career becomes their life. It's not. It's a job. It's a good job, and it's meaningful. But at the end of the day, my wife and my kids, they don't need a cop at home. They need dad. And learning to take that uniform off, I think that's extremely powerful.
Definitely.
And for me, what I like to do to get out and go fishing.
You and me both, yeah.
Yeah, kayak fishing, you name it. I don't get out often enough because I got a bunch of children, but...
You and me both, again, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so, and they're young, so it's hard to get out. But if I can get out into the woods or a river and just kind of recuperate, I mean, that does a lot. And the other thing is talking to people.
Yeah.
I think breaking that stigma is a good thing.
You've mentioned a couple of cases you've worked on during your career, but is there one, without giving away any sensitive details, but is there one that really sticks out to you that you responded to as a tech?
It stands out in what way?
Emotionally, or a case that you are so proud of because you got results or justice for a family?
Yeah. Well, when I first got into the crime scene division down in Louisiana, I remember this case specifically. This is an example of the proud one, and then I'll go into some more traumatic ones. I was working a case where an elderly lady was killed. And the crime scene investigation down there had a bunch of different disciplines, and if you might be the crime scene detective that gets the actual scene, and so you're doing the on-scene investigation, and you might be the person that photographs the autopsy. So part of our job down there is when I was on duty, if there was a postmortem autopsy related to a sheriff's office case, I was in the autopsy taking all the photographs with the pathologist and her team while they're doing the investigation. Every cut every incision, everything gets a little placard put on it, and we take a picture of it. So I got the autopsy for this particular case, and the gist of it is that an elderly lady was killed in her home. It was a gunshot, while her husband was, unfortunately and kind of ironically, attending a funeral. She was bound by duct tape. She had duct tape over her mouth, and I remember getting to the postmortem and just I don't remember even how old she was, but she was at least in her 70s. Mm-hmm. Not someone you'd expect to die from gunfire, you know. What I remember about doing this is I had remembered some techniques where we were going to cut away the duct tape and freeze the duct tape so it wasn't sticky anymore, so that we could process it with sticky side powder, which is a powder that we suspend in water and photo flow to paint onto the duct tape and then rinse off to get fingerprints off the sticky side of tape. It's quite effective. Tape makes amazing prints. So I remember going through this autopsy, cutting off the duct tape, and doing the standard thing that we would do in a postmortem. We would clip the fingernails off. We'd do scrapings underneath the fingernails. We'd take DNA swabs of the hands and other things like that, and submitting those all to the lab. Well, I did this case, and I didn't think much of it after that. Well, Homicide had done an excellent job on their part of the investigation, and they identified a person by a nickname, and they realized they didn't have his DNA on file. But before that, from underneath the fingernail, one of the scrapings popped for a unique DNA profile that was not the decedent. So that got Homicide thinking, like, whose DNA is that? And they were able to get a DNA warrant for this person they believed was this nickname, and they were an exact match. Well, the way it came to me was I got a phone call from my lieutenant and mentor, Alan, and he called me out to a substation, and I see SWAT trucks gearing up to go do multiple Bearcats ready with teams of deputies on them ready to go, helicopter overhead and everything like that. And I was like, why did you call me out here? He's like, your DNA scraping from underneath her fingernail is what caused this moment.
Wow.
So it was like, whoa, a very, very powerful moment. It just, one of the cool things about forensic investigations is that you do become the voice for the voiceless. People who cannot get justice for themselves and they can't speak for themselves anymore because of the unthinkable crime happening. Teams of people all over the country doing CSI are doing exactly that. They're stepping into that void to be that voice.
Yeah, so what do you, and that's a great segue into one of my final questions here. What do you want the public to know and understand about what is going on behind the scenes?
We can't clear it in 45-minute episodes. I think that's one of the, I love the CSI shows for the sense that they spark an interest from the public. Every time someone finds out from the public that I work in forensics and do CSI, there's a million questions, and I love the passion. The thing that I would just ask for is patience, because while you might watch a 45-minute program with 3 commercial breaks, a couple of my homicides to process all the evidence, to pack all the evidence, to go down all the unlimited rabbit holes have taken more than a year.
Yeah.
So,
well, you stole my final question. I was going to end on asking you about CSI the show, but I'll follow up with that. You mentioned that the show has created challenges,
unrealistic expectations.
Right, unrealistic expectations. But at the same time, do you see, since the show became popular, a trend as far as officers getting into, or people getting into law enforcement because of what they see on that show and having an interest in doing tech work?
Yeah.
Were you one of those individuals?
No. Like I said, it just came to me kind of through happenstance in that one investigation.
Yeah.
But I do see it inspiring people. That was about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now. Dylan Lipinski is a detective here, and we went down to show a bunch of homeschool kids at the library down here and teach them a fingerprint class. And just watching them enhance their own fingerprints with the dust and seeing the ridge detail and knowing that that is a unique identifier for them, watching the light bulbs go off is a wonderful thing. It's totally creating passion for people. The CSI show, I think overall, is they're a good thing. They're bringing recognition to the unsung heroes of law enforcement. Because let's be honest here, when the investigation comes to a conclusion and the homicide suspect's arrested, it's not the crime scene tech walking them in front of the news camera, right? They may never be mentioned until, never even comes out. People don't know my name until the trial, which is fine. We're kind of like the magicians that are behind the curtain. So it definitely brings them to light, and I think the public has shown that they're interested in those types of shows. It's a good thing.
Well, you have my word, and thankfully we don't have a lot of violent crime here, but you have my word that I will get you out in front of the camera the next time there's a big case that you help solve.
Oh, I don't need that. Okay. I don't need that. I'd prefer to be in the lab.
Well, you are an unsung hero, and we appreciate you and all the other techs we have. Remind me, how many techs do we have right now?
Oh, I'd have to look at the roster, but I think it's 7 or 8. Basically, we identify officers that have that particular brand of OCD.
Yeah.
And I like to say that if you are in crime scene investigation, you can't have a lazy bone in your body, because we take things to the max detail on every investigation that we touch. So we look for those trends in people, we approach them, and then we train them. They go through my 36-hour class here at the PD, and try to get them all the hands-on training that they need during that class to just start their forensic journey, and then we get them out in the field.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for what you do. Thank you again for sitting down with me here today. It's a fascinating world, CSI.
Yeah, absolutely.
So really appreciate you shedding the light and explaining to the viewers and listeners how this all works. And I guess the message you have is to stay patient.
Stay patient. These things take time. And good investigations take time. And the thing about crime scene investigation is we're not going to cut corners. And so, just be patient with that. But I love the interest, and I love that people are really seeing and bringing forensics to the forefront with these shows. I think that's a good thing.
All right. MPO David Heyer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. This was episode 9 of the APB podcast. We will see you next week. Stay safe, everybody.